It's Thursday, November 12th, and welcome to the New York Amsterdam News Podcast. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. We continue our coverage of the 2020 presidential election with my guest, AM News senior writer Herb Boyd. We're going to discuss Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's win, President Donald Trump's refusal to concede, and the numerous lawsuits he's filed to try and turn over the election. Well, it's been a little over a week since Americans cast their ballots for the 2020 general election. On Saturday, November 7th, it was announced that Democrats Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were named the winners. However, Donald Trump and other Republicans believe the election was, quote, stolen from him, pointing to mass voter fraud without producing any evidence. Meanwhile, Biden and Harris continue to move forward with their transition as the next president and vice president, as Trump refuses to concede and moves forward with lawsuits he hopes will sway the election in his favor. AM News senior writer Herb Boyd is with me to break all of this down and so much more, so let's get into it right now. Herb, how are you doing?
I'm very good.
All right. So it's been, a week and some days since the election, and here we are. Donald Trump still has not conceded and is filing several lawsuits. Just give us your take on what you think is going on and how you see things.
Well, it's no more than business as usual or unusual for him. I mean, the same old irascible, contentious, defiant, uncooperative individual. And one who is just determined to not to go along with what you call a certain kind of political normalcy in this country. I mean, you go all the way back, Josh, to his campaign, and you can see the kind of difficulties he was going to present. And all of them came to pass, not without exception, that he was going to be cantankerous, that he was going to upset the so-called conventional policies and rules and regulations. And so this current situation with him not conceding is consistent with his overall attitude and demeanor, since he's been in office. So as many of the pundits say, no surprises there, because he warned us before that he anticipated a loss, I'm sure. And so he began to set up any kind of a bulwark against being removed from office. Now, those latest moves, in fact, what he's done with the Pentagon, I mean, those are ominous selections there, putting people in place who, in a banana republic, would be in a position to have a coup d'etat. So he's trying to offset the possibility of the military having anything to do with them remaining in office. And that, of course, could be kind of a recipe for disaster in terms of some kind of incipient civil war in this country. We have to be careful about that. It's a dead reckoning.
Absolutely. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about that civil war, because we're hearing that there's some action that's going to be happening in D.C. with the Proud Boys. Trump supporters, of course, are still quite active right now in wanting to keep him as president. While it sounds a little far-fetched, Are we getting there? Because we're seeing, we've seen protesters on the Trump side who have bared arms. We've seen all types of people out there who are very passionate about Donald Trump. We have to keep in mind that, over 70 million people voted for this man. Are we headed to that place?
Well, heaven forbid, Josh. I don't think it's going to necessarily, it's going to be a rancor. It'll be turbulence. But I don't think it'll spill over into out-and-out warfare. That's just inconceivable.
Okay.
First of all, the nation is not prepared as it was during the Civil War in terms of the divide, because you didn't have like a consolidated South. I mean, the South, even looking at Georgia's situation.
Right.
That continues to be like the count is going on there, and I don't know what's the outcome, but it appears that seems like Biden was going to take Georgia. So that would kind of like upset the whole smear of red that we see on the maps and everything. However, that doesn't mean that Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, the Carolinas are out of the mix in terms of wreaking havoc in this country. But I think much is going to depend on what happens with Trump in terms of these latest developments, in terms of appointments, and because he'll be in office for another more than 68, 69 days he's going to be in office.
Right.
So he's starting to make some moves, outrageous, precipitous moves that could be very, very disturbing for Biden's, coming in, because he's got to put together some kind of coalition here and maybe tamp down some of the disgruntled GOP people, to say nothing of folks around Trump, because if you start putting too many progressives in place, you're going to hear from the GOP, and they'll never get nominated for various cabinet posts, which, of course, is another critical situation we face.
Mm-hmm. And I want to talk to you about the members of the GOP who have still not acknowledged that Joe Biden is the president-elect. We see Lindsey Graham, we've seen Mitch McConnell really not mention it. Of course, the vice president has not mentioned it. Only a few, very, very few Republican GOP political people have even acknowledged the fact that Joe Biden is going to be our next president. Tell us about what's going on there. What do you think that fear is? Because obviously they fear Donald Trump, but what will be the lasting effects if they just said, hey, I'm going to just acknowledge this and acknowledge him as the president?
I think the key thing for a lot of those folks, GOPs, who are hesitant to say anything at all about the situation, first of all, the count continues. They can always use that as an excuse. We're waiting to some kind of finality on that. Secondly, they're concerned about, holding the GOP together, holding the party together, particularly elements of the Senate and the House of Representatives. So you have some concerns on that part, because if Trumpism, I think, will continue to some extent, after all this is said and done, you start to put away the cudgels and the weapons and everything and not go after each other's throats. It'll be okay, but you'll still have, like you say, some 71 million people, which of course is just another indication of just the division in this country, which of course that's always been the case. One of the things that's phenomenal about this recent election, is that you have an unprecedented number of people over the last century. I mean, we haven't had this kind of turnout in a long time. And it could reach, Josh, as high as the high 60s and close to 70%.
Right.
And that would be really, that would just be phenomenal. Because that shows that, the electorate is wide awoke. And this particular run has really like shaken the mass. Look at the number of independents. Look at the Latino vote. Those are going to be critical things as we move forward, too, as we look at the next election and we get down to what the heck 2024 is going to look like.
Absolutely. And I do want to go back to these lawsuits, because Trump has filed several lawsuits, even getting, some support, I guess you could call it, from the Supreme Court, to hold or segregate rather some of those ballots in Pennsylvania, even though I'm not sure that's going to make any difference. But we're seeing that a lot of these, lawsuits are being rejected. They're being dismissed. They're being turned down, by these judges. Do you think that these lawsuits will help? Do you think that they will allow him? Will any of these lawsuits make way for Trump to get a second term?
I don't think this is all no more than some more part of his hoodoo voodoo, trying to run a hoodwinking, bamboozle job. It's no more than the snake oil salesman, pulling out all stock to try to say. You have to understand that he basically is humiliated. He's so used to winning and getting his way. He's such an egomaniac. And nothing can be more disturbing for an egomaniac is rejection. And he's been rejected. And so he's just doing everything he can. All these lawsuits are absolutely frivolous. They're not going to go anywhere. You have even GOP and certain judges and Supreme Court Kavanaugh, even Supreme Justice John Roberts. They're all saying, no, this is absolutely futile on his part. Nothing is going to happen there. And even if he get one or two through, we're not going to change the election process, because you have to go through the various states to have those kind of changes made. And so many of the where you would have the Democrats in control, where he got those battleground states, there won't be no changes at all there. I mean, they already set in place. So all of this is no more than an opportunity to save face. How do you deal with rejection and denial? And so he throws that out there. No more than a part of him saying that, this situation was a flawed election. It was fraudulent. It was rigged, and they stole it from me. So if you throw all these legalities out there, even though he's rejected, he can say to his base, I tried to turn this thing around.
Absolutely. So we're seeing the recount that was announced in Georgia, rather, that they're going to do an entire hand recount of the election. I was just looking and, just seeing past, this is done actually several times. This has been done several times, recounts of votes, and it really hasn't changed the outcome only but a few times. And I'm almost definite that this will not change the outcome either. But he would have to, win several other states other than Georgia to win the presidency. So I don't know why a recount, but a recount is necessary here. But what's interesting is how much pressure the the Secretary of State in Georgia, or maybe the Attorney General, I'm not too sure, was being pressured by the Republican Party, by his Republican folks for this recount, which may or may not, signify any results. I mean, I know people were actually asking for this guy to step down, but we're seeing more and more people in the GOP who are just really going along with this bandwagon, who I believe fully well know that this is not going to change anything and that Joe Biden is going to be our next president.
Yeah, you look at that, it's a very curious thing because what is it, a difference of some nearly 15,000 votes? And I'm always curious on how do you do a hand count when you have a digital electronic system?
Exactly. Thank you.
You can do hand counts on absentee ballots. They're coming in. But you got to go through most of them are using machines in this country. The whole lever system is gone.
Right.
So it's going to be, I'm curious on how that's going to be conducted. Not that even in the end it's going to make a difference because it's a little bit too wide. If you said, it was like the year 2000 election, where it's like 500 votes, you can see how that could be critical. But nearly 15,000 votes, you'd have to make up considerable in certain counties. And around Atlanta, it ain't going to happen. And that's where the critical number of the recount happened. And surely the whole hand count is going to happen again there. And it's not going to change things. All this is more or less a continuation of the frustration, how distressed and how discombobulated Trump and his administration is, because the loss is a tremendous setback for them. They thought they would turn this thing around as they did in 2016, despite all the polls and the pundits saying those things. Although we were pretty much, we was wary of that ourselves, that those are not accurate indications in terms of where he was. And I guess the 71 million votes coming out suggests that, okay, but he still lost by 5 million votes, and that was more than he lost out with Hillary Clinton in 2016. So the popular vote is out there, but populism is in question now.
That's an interesting statement, yeah. Well, we've been talking a lot about Donald Trump, and I do want to talk about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who both such an historic win. Joe Biden making history, of course, but Kamala Harris, my goodness, first black woman, first Southeast Asian woman, of course, one of my favorites, first HBCU graduate that's going to be in our, helping to lead our country. Of course, I like that. She's a graduate of Howard University. If you haven't seen it yet, folks, in the Amsterdam News, we have our front page is a pull-out poster of Kamala Harris, our vice president-elect. We're so proud of her here at the Amsterdam News, so please go ahead and pick that up. But Joe Biden seems to be taking this in such stride. He's so calm. Every time you see him and someone asks him about the president, he just seems so cool, calm, and collective. And he's not, being hysterical like we would expect from Donald Trump. This transition obviously is not going to be easy because there are things he needs right now in order to do his job, especially when it comes to COVID-19. And of course, there's a very shocking number right now of COVID cases that is impacting the entire country. We have more than 40 states. I think it's about 48 states right now that are seeing such a spike in COVID when it comes to positive cases and hospitalizations. This is going to have a lasting effect as we move forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, brother, it's such a devastating situation. It seems to be, now that they're talking about the possibilities of having vaccines in place, maybe by the end of the year, and the testing that's going on there with the whole Pfizer, is now Moderna. Those are uplifting things, and I can understand people getting excited about all that, but you have to be careful, because sometimes, you figure that, a solution, we're going to solve this problem, is within reach, so you drop your guard. And next thing you know, you have another outburst. The second wave is just, and as you suggest, Josh, it's accumulating. All 50 states showing upticks in terms of hospitalization, deaths, and the number of people infected. So there's no flattening on that. I mean, it's almost as bad as it was in March, huh? So we have to
get to that level
about the vaccines coming into play, and whether or not 90%, those are tremendous numbers in terms of the testing process. But more testing has to be done before it's widely distributed, and of course that presents another kind of issue in terms of who gets it and when. But the other concern we have, and I think, add to Kamala's thing, immigrant.
Yes. Immigrant. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, add that. And I think all of this is just such good news in one sense. I mean, in this year, this a whole year. This is one of the most tumultuous years of American history. You have to go back to 1917, 1918 to find anything comparable to the kind of how devastated we have with this virus, with this disease. And of course, it's impacted everything.
Absolutely.
The unemployment. I mean, folks are concerned about, when they're going to get any more help from the federal government. That's why the Biden administration coming in is very appealing to people who are absolutely desperate at this point for some kind of relief. We need socioeconomic relief. We need health relief. We need relief in terms of climate change. All these different issues out there in which the Biden-Harris administration coming in could bring a whole fresh wave of optimism and hope and normalcy, to say nothing, to get back even to the old normalcy. I'll accept that.
I know whatever that used to. I think it's been so long I can't remember what that used to be like. But not too long. But we know. I want to talk to you about Kamala Harris. Her win is so historical. On so many levels for Black women, for politics, for this country. I mentioned in my article that she won, and this was kind of relevant to the outfit that she was wearing when she gave her victory speech on Saturday, that she won in the same year that women were given the right to vote, because there's that aspect as well, of course, on top of the race issue. And she wore white. She wore suffrage white during her speech, which I thought was great. She looked wonderful. What does Kamala Harris's election, because it's a win-win for us and others on so many levels. What does Kamala Harris's win mean exactly for future? Because she said it very plainly that she is the first, but she certainly won't be the last. What do you think?
Well, I think one of the things about the vice presidency historically has been almost like ceremonial. They've done very little. But I think her role could probably be exceedingly critical depending on how the Senate race plays out. Because at this point, if you can get a 50-50, it's probably the best result we can get after the runoffs in Georgia. So, if it's a 50-50, that means that the vice president has some power now, can make some decisions and break the tie as a result of that position. So that would be an unusual circumstance, but of course it's not out of the question given the kind of unusualities we've had, you might say, over the last several months in this country, going certainly back into March when the pandemic broke out. So that's a possibility. having her here, of course, a lot of people are raising some concerns about her previous record in terms of how she dealt with it out in San Francisco, and as well as in the California legislature in terms of dealing with the adjudication of various cases out there. Some concerns about that. Same way they're raising it about Biden in terms of the omnibus crime bill back when he was in the Senate. So we have, situations in which the past, they bring up these past concerns to offset some of the possible progressive moves it can make. But I think the critical condition would be, first of all, let's get this here Georgia situation out of the way.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The hand count there, and what, I don't think it's going to turn anything around at all. You talk about nearly 15,000. But that's a critical thing in terms of how the Biden-Harris administration will get certain kind of legislation done, because, you're still going to run into a McConnell, you're going to still run into a Senate, a GOP-controlled Senate, too, if we don't get that Georgia difference, those two positions in place to make it a 50-50 situation where Kamala can step in and exercise her power as vice president.
Okay. And let me ask you this. This is something I've been wanting to ask you since this all happened, since Saturday.
Sure.
Do you think, we've seen a lot of vice presidents eventually become president. Do you think that Kamala Harris could be our first black woman president in the position that she's in right now? Do you think it's possible?
It's possible, sure. It's certainly possible. But whether it's probable, becomes the issue. So much depends on what happens over the next 4 years. Oh, my goodness. First of all, we're going to have to get this pandemic under control.
Yeah, that's got to be the priority.
That's going to have a lot of, impact and effect in terms of the administrative and the productive, progressive aspects of the Biden-Harris administration, which could all go well. Then you have to look at the economy. Then you have to look at foreign policy. All we have to see exactly what's going on with these last couple of months for the Trump administration, kind of havoc he can wreak, and that could set up situations already, like you're going to kind of turn things around where he's chipped away at the Obama legacy. Every vestige of that has been eviscerated. So, you have Biden come in, try to put all those things back together again. He's so busy trying to put things, simple things as they used to be, it's hard to move ahead on some other things. So that'll have an impact in terms of how the, 2024 situation plays out, whether she demonstrates that she has administrative, sagacity, that she has some understanding of how to govern, that she can continue to appeal to those independents, and particularly the Latino vote in this country. All those things are going to come into play. So it's so much that says, hey, my goodness, up in the air, hard to determine. You can speculate and prognosticate on that stuff, but it's hard to see exactly what happens. Let's discuss this again in maybe 2 years from now. And maybe we have a better idea, a better handle on where she's standing. And whether she really wants to run for it.
That's another thing. Yeah, she's so young, and I think that she has a lot of time to. Not young, but she's at an age where she can really, if she wants to, she has time to think about it. So I think that if she ever does want to run for president, she certainly has the time to do that. But yeah, I just want to say, I when I was writing her article about her and just learning, I knew her story, but when I really, really got to dig deep into her story and learn about all the things that really shaped her, being Attorney General, of California, prior to that being a district attorney in San Francisco, and then of course her Senate run, her Senate win, her being U.S. Senator of California, were just monumental moments, and those were small things. So the fact that she went to Howard, the fact that she's Alpha Kappa Alpha, those are two things that are very important to her, that shaped her into the woman that she is, and a very dynamic woman that she is. And the other thing I think that's amazing is the foundation of her family. Her father from Jamaica, her mother from India, and her sister, growing up in the Bay Area of California, being bused, that situation also shaped her. And all these things that created what we have today, Kamala Harris, our first black woman who is, going to be our VP. And I think that alone, the fact that she's the first woman that happened to be a black woman who's doing this just speaks volumes to me and is so amazing. Want to talk to you about some of the appointments that Trump has made this week to the Pentagon. What's going on there? We got people. I'm going to be I'm going to be quite honest with you. I'm a little nervous about what's going on there in the Pentagon with some of the appointments that he's made, the firings that he's done, and people that he's brought in. Can you share with us your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the things, certainly foreign policy comes into play here, because you are concerned about decisions that he can make between now and January. And some of them are critical when it comes to like Iran, Afghanistan, China, Russia. All those things come into play because that's foreign policy. And he can make he's wreaking all kind of havoc on that and making those appointments, and possibly as a safeguard to head off the kind of defiance he has in terms of concession, of the Oval Office, that he keeps the military in place. You don't want this banana republic to turn into a coup d'etat. Because he's got his people there in place who can render decisions in his favor if they move in that direction. I think one of the things you're saying about Kamala that has not been said enough, as far as I'm concerned, is the black man, who her father.
Yeah.
Her father was a Malcolmite.
Okay. Something a lot of us don't know. Yeah.
Oh yeah, a lot of people kind of dismiss that if they know it, but he certainly was. He wrote a beautiful article for the Jamaican Gleaner back when he was a student, out in California. It was just a powerful piece in terms of supporting his black nationalist perspectives. And I don't know, Kamala only mentioned him a couple of times, but I think we have to keep that in mind, because you don't have any black men as potential cabinet selectors. Mm-hmm. There's only one black man in place, and that's possibly a HUD appointment with Alvin Brown, who used to be the mayor in Jacksonville, Florida. He seems to be there. Possibly Roger Ferguson, who the CEO of Tia Craft, he may be selected in terms of the Treasury Department. But other than that, there's no black men have been mentioned as possible cabinet positions. But these four black women, and of course the progressives are in play with Bernie, possibly in Labor, Elizabeth Warren, possibly in Treasury. But other than that, you look up and down the potential list, no black men. So let's see how that's going to be a concern for a lot of people, saying that, okay, you got black women, but what about us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't even think about that. That's something that we'll be watching, because we want to see who those appointments are. As we move forward with how things turn out. Well, I do have to ask you, last question I want to ask you is on the editorial. We have No More MAGA, 70 days and counting. And it looks like it might be a wrap up for this. Well, definitely is a wrap up for this, because, the Amsterdam News, for folks who don't know, we have been, since Trump has been in office, we have been writing an editorial weekly saying, make America great again, Trump must go. Or maybe it's the other way around. I don't remember exactly, but we've been doing this Trump must go, since the dawn of his presidency.
Well, it's almost 200.
Almost 200, yeah. We've been doing this, and this is kind of a revival of things that we've done in the past with some mayors that we've done in the past, and front pages that we've done similar style editorials, but this time Trump must go. We did that. We did Giuliani must go, I remember, in the 90s, and so now we were doing Trump must go. It's amazing that Rudolph Giuliani is his personal secretary, and now we were doing him with Giuliani must go, and now we've been doing Trump must go. But one of the things I wanted to talk about in the editorial is that there are 70 days left. I think it's like 69 now. 70 days or so less, I'll say that. But there are still things that he can do that can, as it's quoted in the editorial, wreak havoc to upset the democratic process in these 70 days. Can you get into that a little bit, and we'll wrap up? But I just want to know what do you think about that? I mean, 70 days, and there's so much damage that he can still do.
Well, you saw already with the appointments, with the Pentagon. That's at the top of the list, because you're talking about the power zones in the so-called democratic society we have. Those are key issues there. He can begin to change the whole composition of that. And that ramifies and trickles down and touches just about every element of our society, because you are talking about a certain defiance coming from someone who just cannot, an egomaniac, who cannot accept defeat. And so he's looking all over the place where he can upset. Look at the climate situation. We got to render some kind of a correction on that, what he's done there. With NATO, you got to do something. We got to turn that situation around. So all of the things out there that the Biden-Harris administration has to do, he's making sure that he does as much as he can to make it difficult for those changes to occur. I mean, you look at the DACA, with the Dreamer situation. You can't lose sight of the immigration situation. You look at the whole employment, the economy in this situation. What he can do, to upset that. He hasn't done anything in terms of the infrastructure. We got to be concerned about the infrastructure in this country. So all of these things coming into play, the Affordable Care Act, he's doing all he can. And of course, you got the GOP people stepping up now and saying, that's not going to happen. The Supreme Court saying the same thing. So all of those particular decisions he's trying to put in place in terms of the lawsuits, we couldn't get this sucker out of there in terms of the impeachment. We couldn't do much about the lawsuits, to say nothing of sexual harassment charges. But the American people, the populace, have spoken, and he's got to go. So that's what we're saying with MAGA, hey, Trump must go, and whether or not that was the last one. Hey, he ain't gone completely. He's still around. We got to fumigate the White House. We got get the infestation out of there, and also exorcise the demons from the White House. That's still to be done.
All right. Well, with that, we will conclude. Herb, thank you so much. This has been a great interview, and also this whole process of the presidential election has been wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us your insights.
Okay, Josh. Bye.
That concludes this week's podcast. You can pick up the latest edition of the New York Amsterdam News on newsstands and get updates online at amsterdamnews.com. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at NY Amsterdam News and follow us on Twitter at NYAmNews. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. Thanks for listening.